the school year, if the weather was nice, some of us rode our bikes to school. And some of us had paper routes, and we delivered the paper using our bikes. And for some of us who had a lawn mowing job, we would use the bike to tow the lawnmower. Let me show you how we did it. We would turn the lawnmower around backwards, put one hand on the handlebar of the lawnmower, put the other hand on the handlebar of the bike, and you would tow that bad boy to where you were going to mow your lawn. Here's where I'm going with all of this. One day my father called to me. I had ridden up into the lawn, up into the yard, put down the kickstand on the bike, and I was about to go into the house. And my father called me and told me that he had some advice to give me about bicycle riding. But the counsel that he gave that day was unlike anything you or I might expect. He could have said, you should always wear a helmet. That would have been good advice. He could have said, look both ways before you cross the street. That would have been good practical advice. He could have said, when you're getting ready to make a turn, slow down. He could have said, when you are riding on a pebble surface, you've got to go a little bit slower because you can easily lose control on a pebble when you're riding on a gravel road. But the advice that he gave that day was profound. He said, son, whenever you are riding your bike, if you should ever happen to fall down and hit the ground hard, my advice is that you jump up and try it again. Daddy wasn't talking about bicycles. He was talking about life, y'all. Much of life involves trying something and falling down and getting up and trying again and trying it again. You try to learn a subject and you don't quite get it the first time, but you try it again. You try to achieve something and you don't quite make it to your goal, but you got to try it again. You try a relationship and sometimes the relationship doesn't work out, but you may have to try to build another relationship. You got to keep on trying it again. In the book of Genesis 2 verse 17, God tried something and it didn't work. In Genesis 2 verse 17, God said to Adam, if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. And it didn't work. Adam didn't listen. He did the very opposite of what God had told him to do. And it was not until recently that I gained some real insight into this passage and the kind of disappointment that God must have felt. And it came by way of my son. At the age of 16, my son stood a little over 6'1". He wore a size 10.5 shoe. And he could eat up just about everything you could tote into the house. I would carry it in and he would suck it up. I would just bring it in. If Jordan ate breakfast at 8, he's ready to eat lunch by 11:30. And I would sometimes say to him, can't you just wait until 12 noon to eat? He said, no, Daddy, I'm hungry right now. And one night I said to him, I said, I've got some things that I've got to do early tomorrow morning. And you're going to have to get your own breakfast. And I had stocked up because I knew he was going to be there. I said, I stocked up and you've got a choice of what you can eat. I said, now if you want some fruit for breakfast, I've got apples, oranges, and grapes in the refrigerator. If you don't want fruit, you can have some toast and juice. I said, there's a loaf of whole wheat bread on the counter next to the toaster, and there's 3 kinds of juice in the refrigerator. Orange juice, grape juice, and apple juice. I said, if you don't want that, look up in the cabinet, and there are 2 boxes of cereal in the cabinet. There's some Kellogg's Rice Krispies and some toast raisin bran. So you could have cereal for breakfast. But if you don't want that, look up in the freezer. There are some frozen whole wheat waffles in the freezer, and there's 2 kinds of syrup in the cabinet. There's some maple syrup and there's some Mrs. Butterworth's. And I was going on and on about what he could eat for breakfast, and he said, Dad, don't worry about it. I got it. I can figure it out. I'm old enough to get my own breakfast. Just leave me alone. So I left it at that. Next morning, I got up, went and did what I had to do, came back, and just out of curiosity, I said, well, what did you have for breakfast? I said, did you have the fruit? He said, no, I didn't want the fruit. I said, well, you must have had the toast and the juice, right? He said, no, I didn't have that. I said, well, you must have had the cereal. I said, you like that toast raisin bran. That's what you had. He said, no, I didn't have that either. I said, well, you must have had the waffles with the Mrs. Butterworth's syrup. He said, no, I didn't have that either. I said, well, son, what did you eat? He said, Dad, I noticed that you had some leftover barbecue wings and chicken ribs in the refrigerator. And I said, son, you mean to tell me that you had barbecue ribs and chicken for breakfast? He said, no, I just ate the chicken. And at that moment, Genesis 2, verse 12, verse 17 made a whole lot of sense. I had a better idea of how God must have felt. God had said, Adam, you may eat everything except the fruit from the tree which is in the center of the garden. God had given Adam and I had given Jordan Bell a menu of choices. They both ignored the choices which had been provided and selected something else. Genesis 2:17 didn't work out. So God, out of his great love for us, prepared himself a body, circled around, and tried to make the same point from a different angle. From Genesis 2:17, which says, if you eat from this tree, you will surely die. He circled around to John 6:51, which says, I am the bread of life. He that eats of this bread will live forever. What he had said before, he said again in a different kind of way. He circled around to make the same point. Y'all may not believe me, but God does work in circles. I've seen him do it in both my life and the scriptures. I've seen him work in a circle in my own family. And let me tell you something. In 1927, in Tampa, Florida, my mother's mother passed away at the age of 21. At the time of her death, she was 2 and her brother was a newborn. And for whatever reason, their father could not or would not take on the responsibility of raising them. I have been told, I don't know whether it is true, but I have been told that he wanted to give my mother and her brother away. But my mother's grandmother, whose name was Mamie Young, was living in Georgia. And she got wind of it and said to him, send the babies to me. Mamie Young was up in years and had already gone through the parenting cycle. She had raised her children. Her children were grown. She had already done that, but she jumped up and tried it again. God worked in a circle. My mother and Uncle